In the dusty, sun-beaten square of a town that called itself Redemption, a woman named Amelia stood tied to a post, her back a canvas of raw, crimson lines where the marshal's whip had fallen. Her crime was refusal. She had refused the hand of the town's land baron, a brutish man named Bartholomew whose power was as wide and ugly as the stain of tobacco on his teeth. The town watched, their silence a form of consent, their pity a useless vapor in the oppressive heat. From the shadows of the general store porch, a man emerged. His name was Caleb, and his face was a geography of hardship, carved from the granite of the high plains where he ran a solitary ranch. Grief had hollowed him out years ago, leaving a stoic shell that felt nothing, wanted nothing. Yet, watching the unyielding line of Amelia's jaw, the straightness of her spine even as she trembled, something ancient and forgotten stirred in the ash of his heart. He walked into the center of the square, his steps slow and deliberate, drawing the eyes of the crowd. He stopped before Bartholomew. The air crackled with tension. "Let me make you my wife," he said, his voice a low rumble, not of passion, but of cold, hard pragmatism. The words were directed at Bartholomew, not at her. It was a transaction. A claim. He tossed a heavy leather pouch at the baron's feet, the jangle of coins a sound more final than any gunshot. It was the price of her fine, the cost of her defiance. He never looked at her face, only at the ropes that bound her. He cut them with his own knife, the blade severing her past from her future in one clean motion. He helped her stand, his touch impersonal, a steadying hand on a trembling arm, and led her to his wagon without another word. The town of Redemption watched them go, a ghost of a man and the woman he had just purchased, their futures now entwined by a contract sealed in shame and silver. The journey to his homestead was a study in silence, a long, rattling passage through a landscape as stark and unforgiving as the man who drove the wagon. The wind scraped across the plains like a dry whisper, and the sky was a vast, empty bowl of blue. Amelia sat beside him, the rough-spun blanket he had given her wrapped around her shoulders, a flimsy shield against the chill that had little to do with the temperature. She did not weep. The tears had been burned out of her long ago, leaving behind a resilient quietude. She watched him, his hands firm on the reins, his gaze fixed on the horizon as if searching for something he knew he would never find. His profile was hard, a study in angles and shadows, a man who had made a fortress of his own solitude. When they finally arrived, the ranch was a testament to his inner world. It was a place of stark order, a small, sturdy house and a well-kept barn set against the immense emptiness of the land. But inside, the air was cold and still, thick with the dust of disuse and the lingering scent of sorrow. It was a house that had forgotten how to breathe. He showed her to a small room at the back, containing little more than a narrow cot and a wash basin. "This is yours," he said, his words as spare as the furnishings. "You'll cook. You'll mend. You are safe from him here." He did not say she was welcome. He did not say she was home. It was an agreement, an arrangement of mutual necessity. She would bring order to his house, and he would provide a sanctuary from the world that had tried to break her. In the quiet of her new room, Amelia touched the fading welts on her back, each one a memory, and understood that she had merely traded one cage for another, albeit one with a kinder, if more distant, keeper. Her presence began to change the house not with noise or argument, but with the subtle, persistent pressure of life itself. Amelia moved through the cold rooms like a slow, warming current, her quiet competence a balm on the home's unacknowledged wounds. The first morning, the scent of fresh coffee and baking bread filled the air, a fragrance so alien and yet so deeply familiar that it made Caleb pause at the doorway, his hand on the frame, a strange tightness in his chest. He watched her work, her movements economical and graceful. She scrubbed the floors until the wood gleamed with a warmth he hadn't seen since his wife, Martha, had passed. She mended the rip in his favorite work shirt with stitches so small and perfect they were nearly invisible, a silent act of care that felt more intimate than a touch. He found himself observing her hands, scarred from a life of hardship, yet endlessly capable as they kneaded dough, stoked the fire, or polished the tarnished silver of a single, forgotten candlestick until it shone. He would return from the fields, bone-weary and grim, to find a hot meal on the table and a clean, quiet order that was beginning to seep past his defenses. One afternoon, he discovered a small, intricately whittled bird, carved from a scrap of firewood, sitting on the windowsill overlooking the plains. It was a tiny, defiant piece of art in a world of stark function. He picked it up, the smooth wood warm in his palm. It was not a gesture meant for him, but it felt like one. It was a sign that something other than grief could exist within these walls, and the realization was as unsettling as it was unwelcome, a single green shoot breaking through frozen ground. His daughter, Lily, was a small, silent echo of her father, a pale wisp of a child with eyes that held the same deep, guarded sorrow. At 5 years old, she had learned that the world was a place of loss and that love was a thing that could be stolen away in the night by a fever. She watched Amelia with a wary, animal caution, a ghost in her own home, flitting from room to room but never settling. Amelia, sensing the child's fear, did not press. She did not offer false smiles or loud greetings. She simply created a space of warmth and predictability, a quiet gravity that the little girl could slowly, safely orbit. She would hum old, half-forgotten lullabies while she worked, the melodies weaving themselves into the fabric of the house. One day, as Amelia was mending one of Lily's small dresses, the child approached, her tiny hands clutching a single, slightly wilted prairie primrose. She held it out, a silent offering. Amelia stopped her work, her expression soft, and accepted the flower with a reverence that made the simple weed feel like a treasure. She placed it in a glass of water on the kitchen table, a spot of bright, living color in the center of their quiet world. A week later, as Amelia sat by the fire braiding her long, dark hair for the night, Lily crept to her side. The child reached out a hesitant hand and touched the finished braid. Her voice, when it came, was as fragile as a bird's wing. "Are you my new mother?" The question was a stone dropped into a still, deep well, its ripples touching every corner of the silent house. From the darkened doorway of the main room, Caleb stood frozen, listening. The innocent words had pierced his armor more surely than any arrow, striking the raw, grieving heart he thought he had buried long ago. The world outside turned white. A blizzard descended from the mountains without warning, a furious, howling beast that entombed the small ranch in a world of swirling snow and screaming wind. The landscape, once merely empty, was now actively hostile, isolating them completely. It was in this crucible of ice and fury that Lily's fever began. It started as a faint flush on her cheeks and a listlessness in her limbs, but by nightfall, she was burning, her small body racked with shivers beneath a mountain of blankets. Caleb felt a cold, familiar dread grip him, the icy ghost of the past rising to haunt him. He was a capable man, skilled in mending fences and breaking horses, but against the spectre of sickness, he was helpless, his hands large and clumsy. He knew how to fight the elements, but not the fire within his own child. It was Amelia who took charge. Her calm was a steady anchor in his rising panic. She bathed Lily's forehead with cool water, her touch infinitely gentle. She brewed a tea from the herbs she had gathered and dried, her quiet murmurs a constant, soothing presence in the sick room. Caleb became a creature of simple, desperate tasks. He kept the fire roaring, melted snow for water, and stood as a helpless sentinel, watching this woman he barely knew fight for his daughter's life with a fierce, quiet tenacity. He watched her hold Lily's small hand, whispering stories of sunlit fields and brave little birds, her voice a lifeline in the feverish dark. In her care, he saw not the duty of a hired hand, but the profound, unwavering strength of a mother, a role his house had so painfully lacked. The storm outside raged, but the true tempest was inside him, a maelstrom of fear, gratitude, and a painful, thawing hope. In the long, hushed hours of the third night, with the blizzard still shrieking and Lily's fever finally showing signs of breaking, the walls between them crumbled. They sat by the hearth in the main room, the fire casting flickering shadows that danced like memories on the walls. The silence was different now, not a chasm of distance but a shared space of exhaustion and vulnerability. It was Caleb who spoke first, his voice rough, as if tearing the words from his own throat. He spoke of Martha, his first wife, of her laughter that used to fill this house, and of the fever that had swept through and taken her, leaving him with a guilt so heavy it had crushed his spirit. I couldn't save her, he confessed to the flames, the words a poison he had held inside for years. A man is supposed to protect his family. I stood right here, in this very room, and I could do nothing but watch her fade. He finally looked at Amelia, his eyes raw with an agony he had never shown another living soul. Seeing the crack in his formidable armor, Amelia offered a piece of her own brokenness in return. She spoke of her husband, a gentle farmer killed by rustlers for a handful of cattle, and of the lonely, predatory world she was cast into as a widow. She described Bartholomew's relentless advances, not as courtship, but as a claim of ownership. My refusal, she said softly, her gaze steady, it was all I had left of him. It was a promise I made to the memory of a love that was kind in that shared darkness, illuminated only by the firelight. They were no longer a rancher and his purchased housekeeper. They were two survivors, two souls scarred by the cruelties of the frontier, who recognized in each other the quiet, enduring strength it takes to simply keep breathing. He reached out, his calloused fingers gently tracing the line of her jaw, a gesture of such profound, unspoken understanding that it felt more binding than any vow. The storm broke as suddenly as it had arrived, leaving behind a world scoured clean and draped in a blinding blanket of white. The peace was short-lived. A neighbor, having fought his way through the drifts, brought word. Bartholomew, his pride wounded and his avarice stoked by the long confinement, had declared the transaction in the square a sham. He claimed Caleb had stolen his rightful property and was riding out to the ranch with a posse of hired men to take Amelia back by force. A cold fury, clean and sharp, rose in Caleb. This was not the dull, aching grief he was used to, it was a living, protective fire. He strode to the mantel and took down his rifle, the weight of it familiar and solid in his hands. He turned to Amelia, her face pale but her eyes resolute. Take Lily to the storm cellar. Bar the door from the inside. She looked at him, 1,000 unspoken fears and one unwavering trust passing between them in a single glance. She did as he asked, herding the now recovering child to safety. Caleb did not wait for them to arrive. He did not fortify his home. He strode out into the blinding snow and met them at the edge of his property line, a solitary figure against the vast white expanse. Bartholomew and his men reined in their horses, their dark forms a blot on the pristine landscape. I've come for what's mine, Caleb, Bartholomew snarled. Caleb raised his rifle, but not to aim. He held it as a statement. You are on my land, he said, his voice carrying with an authority that seemed to shake the very air. And the woman in that house is not property. She is my wife. She is my family. Anyone who means her harm will have to come through me. It was a declaration made not to a town square full of silent onlookers, but to the threat itself. It was not a transaction. It was a vow, sealed with the promise of violence, a wall of absolute resolve he had built around his home and his heart. Bartholomew was a predator who preyed on the weak, a bully who postured and threatened but had little appetite for a true fight against a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. He saw the unyielding certainty in Caleb's eyes, a promise of a grave in the snow, and his courage faltered. After a tense, silent standoff, he spat a curse into the snow, wheeled his horse around, and retreated, his men trailing behind him like whipped dogs. The threat dissolved back into the horizon from which it came. Caleb stood for a long moment, watching them go, the cold air burning in his lungs. Then, he turned and walked back to the house that was, for the first time in years, truly a home. He found Amelia standing just inside the doorway, her hand on the frame, Lily peering out from behind her skirts. The fear had receded from her eyes, replaced by a deep, luminous gratitude. The air between them was charged, a silence teeming with all the things their sparse words could never capture. He walked past her and went to a small, dusty wooden box on the mantelpiece, a box he hadn't opened since Martha's passing. He took out a simple, unadorned silver ring, worn smooth with time. It had been his mother's. He turned back to Amelia, his hardened features softened by an emotion he was only just learning to name. He held out the ring. In town, I said I would make you my wife. That was a bargain to save your life, he said, his voice thick and unsteady. Now I ask if you will be my wife. To build a life, it was not a command or a contract. It was a question, a humble, hopeful plea. Amelia looked from the ring in his calloused palm to the raw vulnerability in his eyes. A single tear, the first he had ever seen her shed, traced a path down her cheek. She didn't speak. She simply held out her hand, and her silent acceptance was the only answer he needed. Spring arrived as a quiet miracle, a slow, green unfurling across the plains. The snow melted, feeding the creeks and washing the world new. The ranch, once a monument to stillness and sorrow, was now alive with the gentle hum of a new beginning. A small patch of earth near the house, once barren, was now a garden, where Amelia coaxed bright flowers and hardy vegetables from the soil. The windows of the house stood open, letting in the sweet, warm air and the sound that had been absent for so long, the sound of Lily's laughter. The child, no longer a silent ghost, now chased butterflies in the yard, her world made safe and bright by the steady, quiet love that now filled their home. Caleb was a changed man. The hard lines of grief around his eyes had softened, and a quiet smile now came to him as easily as a breath. He was teaching Lily to ride a small, shaggy pony, his large hands gentle as he held her steady. Amelia would watch them from the porch, her heart a vessel so full it ached. One evening, as the sun bled orange and purple across the horizon, Caleb came and stood behind her, his hands resting on her shoulders. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the day end, a man and a woman who had found each other in the wreckage of their pasts. Their communication was still one of gestures and shared glances, but the silence was no longer a void of loneliness. It was a shared language of intimacy, a peaceful haven built on a foundation of mutual respect and unspoken devotion. The harsh landscape no longer seemed like a prison, but a vast, open promise, a testament to the fact that even in the most desolate of places, life and love could take root and flourish. For some hearts are like the winter ground of the high plains, frozen solid by the killing frost of loss, seemingly barren forever. They become fortresses of ice, impenetrable and cold, guarding the memory of what was against the promise of what could be. But the story of Caleb and Amelia was a testament to a quieter, more patient truth, that the persistent warmth of a gentle hand, the steady light of a resilient spirit, can thaw even the most desolate of landscapes. A transaction born of desperation in a dusty town square had, through the slow alchemy of shared days and weathered storms, transformed into a sacred covenant of the heart. The man who sought only a pair of hands to run his home found the architect of his own healing. The woman who sought only a safe harbor from the world's cruelty found a place to anchor her soul. Their journey was not one of grand pronouncements or fiery passions, but of the quiet, profound moments that truly build a life, a shared meal, a mended shirt, a wildflower in a glass, a hand held in the dark. The scars they both carried did not disappear, they remained, not as symbols of what had been broken, but as the intricate, beautiful maps that had led them, finally, to each other. And so they stood, the three of them, a man, a woman, and a child, a small, unlikely family silhouetted against the vast, forgiving western sky, their quiet love a beacon of hope in the immense and wild frontier. The story of Caleb and Amelia reminds us that even the most broken hearts can learn to beat again. It shows that true strength isn't found in a loud voice or a heavy hand, but in the quiet resilience of a gentle spirit. Their journey teaches us that sometimes, the greatest love stories aren't written in grand declarations, but in the silent, everyday acts of care and protection. It's a powerful testament to how choosing kindness and courage can heal not only our own wounds, but the wounds of those around us, building a family where there was once only emptiness. If their story of redemption and newfound love touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspirational stories that celebrate the strength of the human spirit. Click the notification bell so you never miss a new video that proves love can truly blossom in the most unexpected of places. Thank you for watching.